Okay guys, today's focus is the kingdoms plant, fungi, protists and the domain prokaryote. Now we know that there's two domains, right? There's the eukaryote and the prokaryote domain. And then there's kingdoms that fall under the eukaryotic domain, that is animals, plants, fungi and protists. The prokaryote domain is something we'll discuss later. Let's first talk about the plant kingdom. So we know that the plant kingdom falls under the domain eukaryote, so it's going to have eukaryotic cells. Similar to animals, plants are multicellular organisms. The only difference is the extra features plant cells have, like cell walls made of cellulose and chloroplasts for photosynthesis, that is, to make their own food via sunlight. These chloroplasts carry a pigment called chlorophyll, which is what then traps the sunlight and then photosynthesis happens. Now, this is what classifies a plant as an autotroph, which is essentially an organism that makes its own food, right? Unlike an animal, which is classified as a heterotroph or an organism that relies on other means to feed. Now, just by their appearance, you can probably differentiate between an animal and a plant, right? So let's look at how plants are classified and how to identify their types based on some of their external and internal features, just like we did with animals. So to put it simply, most plants have roots, a stem and leaves, right? And some of them have flowers. Now this some of them situation is what ends up classifying the plants essentially. So the types of plants we've got are ferns, mosses and flowering plants. Now ferns are also known as non-flowering plants and flowering plants are, well, flowering plants, right? So our focus is just going to be these two. Now, ferns are pretty simple. They're like regular plants with roots, a stem, leaves, all of that. Let's take a look at the parts of a fern for a bit. So, the leaves of a fern are called fronds. And here's the interesting part. So, just on the under surface of those leaves are tiny, tiny dots called spores. These spores are what take part in reproduction of these plants. So these spores basically fall off the leaves or get stuck to animal fur and are spread around and then replanted into the soil naturally. Nature has a pretty cool way of working out, doesn't it? Now, another cool thing about ferns is that their stems extend underground a little bit, but they're not roots essentially, they are still the stem. They're just given a different name at this point. They're called the rhizome. Alright, so that was it for ferns. Let's now talk about flowering plants. Flowering plants again have the same basic structure. They've got roots, they've got a stem and leaves. The only difference is that they have flowers, as the name suggests. So obviously that's what makes them different from ferns, right? But there's another difference between flowering plants and ferns. Remember how I told you that ferns reproduce via spores? So flowering plants are different in this sense because they have seeds that are used in their reproduction. So let's talk about where these seeds are. Basically, a flower has an organ within it called the ovary. That ovary is what eventually grows to become a fruit. So the ovary itself is what stores the seeds. These are the same annoying seeds that come in your mouth when you're having fruit. And remember, you're not the only one having fruits. Animals eat these too, right? So animals tend to spit the seeds out in different places, and those seeds again go into the soil and start growing another flowering plant. Once again, nature just doing its job. Alright, so now let's talk about the subclassification of flowering plants. So these flowering plants are divided into monocotyledonous and dicotyledonous plants, or monocot and dicot. I know, weird looking words, but it will make sense, I promise. So what is a cotyledon? Let's talk about that first. A cotyledon is the first leaf that sprouts out of the soil from a seed. Now the prefix mono essentially means one and di means two. So obviously this means that the first leaf that sprouts out of the soil in a monocotyledonous plant will be a single leaf, while in a dicotyledonous plant, you've probably already figured this out by now, that the first sprout is made of two leaves rather than one. Alright, so that was the major difference between the two. Now let's look at all of the rest of the differences between a dicot and a monocot plant. And by the end of this, you will be able to recognize which plant is a dicot and which plant is a monocot just by giving it one look. Alright, so we already know that the first sprout is going to differ in number, right? Now that's the sprout above the ground. What about beneath the ground? You guessed it right, we're talking about the roots. So in a monocot, the root, just like the leaf, is going to be a single straight root going deep into the soil. But you can probably see that dicots are a little different. The root from the start has several branches that sort of spread sideways and downwards. Now let's talk about the appearance of their leaves a little bit more. Like if you compare these two leaves, for example, you won't be able to spot any difference on first glance, but really look at the pattern on each of them. One of them looks like that typical leaf that you used to draw as a kid when you were drawing a plant, right? And the other one is a bit more complicated. It's got this branch like pattern on the surface. So the branching appearance of veins on the leaves is in a dicot. This one's easy to remember because even the roots were branching, right? So the parallel lined, simple drawing looking leaves are monocots. So notice how monocots are just generally less complicated than dicots. So it's easy to remember it that way. Another very obvious difference between the two is the appearance of their flowers. So what we need to look at is the petals of the flowers and how many they are. If they're arranged in multiples of threes, then they're probably monocot flowers. And if they're arranged in multiples of fours or fives, then they're definitely dicot flowers. Once again, just a complicated version of monocot. Okay, so those were the external differences, right? There is one internal difference that I want to talk about. Now, plants have this transport system for nutrients and water and dissolved minerals, which is called the vascular bundle. Now, these vascular bundles are multiple and they're arranged within the stem and the roots. The reason I'm telling you this is because the vascular bundles in the stem of a monocot are going to be arranged very differently than that of a dicot. In a dicot, the vascular bundles are arranged in a ring around the periphery of the stem or on the edges of the stem. But in a monocot, the arrangement is completely random. Good news, guys, this is the end of plant kingdom. Alright, let's touch base again real quick and pick up our next topic, which is the fungus kingdom. So fungi, which is a plural for fungus, are usually multicellular organisms whose cells have cell walls. But these walls aren't made of cellulose like the ones in plants, these are made of chitin. Now, even though their cells look very similar to plant cells, there is one major difference, and that is that they don't have chloroplasts and therefore no chlorophyll, which means that they do not photosynthesize. And that makes them heterotrophs. Now, while they're heterotrophs, it's important to note that they're saprophytic in nature. Now, what does that mean? Saprophytic means that they feed on organic matter or act as decomposers, meaning that they'd be feeding on dead organisms or human food or feces, in a way that they release digestive enzyme juices on the food. It gets digested outside their body and then they absorb the nutrients into their body. So this is what saprophytic feeding is. Now, while they're mostly multicellular, like mushrooms and toadstools, there are a few unicellular ones that you need to know as well, like yeast. Okay, so now let's look at the structure of a fungus on the inside that is made by the fungal cells. So we've got these hyphae that are sort of string-like structures, and these hyphae come together to form mycelia or mycelium singular. These look a lot like a plant root and stem, but remember that this is microscopic, so you can't really see it with your naked eye. Then on the very tips of these hyphae, we've got sporangia or sporangium singular. These sporangia contain tiny spores which are then used for reproduction, similar to ferns that we did in plants if you recall. So these microscopic structures come together to form a fungus. So how do fungi behave with regards to other organisms? So fungi can be either harmful or helpful or neither. Some fungi can harm us with infections of our skin like athlete's foot or ringworm. Some grow as mold on our food, which then obviously spoils our food, right? And then there's helpful fungus like yeast, which is used in making bread. So to recap, I've told you that fungi can either be unicellular or multicellular. More commonly, they're multicellular. Then I told you that they're heterotrophic, which means they cannot make their own food. Then I said that their cells have cell walls, but they don't have chloroplasts. Then I also mentioned the hyphae and the mycelium structure of the fungus and how they reproduce. And then I told you that some fungi are harmful while some are helpful. And that's that for fungi. 3 down, 1 to go. But first, practice. Let's work through this question. A green-leafed plant produces spores. To which group does the plant belong? Now, while you think about your answer, I'll give you a few hints. So the first hint here is that it's a green-leafed plant. So we know that this is from the plant kingdom. So B is out of the question, right? Now the second hint here is spores. So we know that dicots and monocots are flowering plants and therefore reproduce via seeds. So the ones that reproduce via spores are then ferns. I hope our thought process was the same. Alright, let's try another one. Some young plants were put into the soil and grew well for a few weeks. They then began to show signs of disease. Samples of the diseased leaves were examined using a microscope. Which observations of the organism causing the disease show that it could be a fungus? Now there's a bunch of characteristics listed here like thread-like structure, no chloroplast, cell walls, and nuclei surrounded by a membrane. So you really need to think about all of the features of fungi that I've told you and then answer this question. Did you get it right? Good, because all of these features are present in fungi. The tricky part here was that it said chloroplasts not present. As a reminder, fungi are heterotrophs, so they don't contain chloroplasts even though they have cell walls. Alright, now we've got the final kingdom from domain eukaryote, which is called protist or protista or protoctist or protoctista. All of these words mean the same thing, so don't freak out if you see one or the other. So you know how I said fungi are mostly multicellular but can be unicellular? Protists are the opposite. So they're mostly unicellular like amoeba, but sometimes they can be multicellular like seaweed. Now what do their cells really look like? Here's the tricky part. Their cells can look like animal cells or plant cells, which means that they can be either heterotrophs or autotrophs depending on the organelles inside them. So amoeba, the example I gave you, looks a lot like an animal cell. It doesn't contain chloroplast, it doesn't have a cell wall, which is why it is a heterotroph. Now what's worth mentioning here is that because it's a unicellular organism, it needs to have some way of movement, right? So an amoeba specifically has these cytoplasmic extensions that help it move from one place to another. Some protists also have tails like flagella to help them move, like this algae cell. But if you look at an algae cell or even the cells inside a seaweed, you will notice that they have cell walls and more importantly, chloroplasts. So this makes them autotrophic. Now remember, they look like plant cells, they behave like plant cells, but they're actually protists. Another word for autotrophic protists, or ones that photosynthesize essentially, is protophyta, while the protists that do not photosynthesize and are heterotrophic are called protozoa. Now, much like fungi, protozoa or the heterotrophic protists usually feed on organic matter like the ones I mentioned previously. Now, protists can be harmful, but most of them just have nothing to do with us. Did you know malaria is caused by a protist? The protist lives inside the mosquito that bites you. Alright, let's come back to our basic slide once again and look at how much we've covered. We've done plant, fungus, and protist. So we're pretty much done and dusted with the eukaryote domain. Now let's look at this prokaryote guy that we've been ignoring for so long. So like I mentioned before, there is a major difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and that is within their cells. The entire cell structure of a prokaryote is very different from that of a eukaryote. Now, most importantly, a prokaryote does not have membrane-bound organelles. And the most important one of these is a nucleus, because you will find out eventually that nuclei are the ones that control the activities of the cell. So essentially, they're the boss. Now, while they do have a cell membrane and sometimes a cell wall and even a capsule around that, and even at times a tail, and then cytoplasm inside, since they don't have any organelles, their genetic material is just floating freely within it. So you'll see a kind of coiled structure of a DNA within the cytoplasm. And you might also see, if you look closely, there's like rings in the cytoplasm. These are called plasmids. These are also a form of mini genetic material, you could call it. So now I know that the word prokaryote is something you haven't heard before, but the moment I say the word bacteria, it's going to ring a bell, right? So this is exactly what they are. Prokaryotic cells are essentially bacterial cells. Fun fact, bacteria are believed to be the world's first organisms. Now, another important feature is that they are almost always unicellular and they are much, much smaller than eukaryotic cells. Now, just like protists, bacterial cells can be photosynthetic or not. So, they can be autotrophic or heterotrophic. Bacteria can also be helpful or harmful. Some bacteria can cause a stomach bug called cholera, or lung infections like pneumonia or tuberculosis. Helpful bacteria mostly play a role in nature, like the carbon and nitrogen cycles. They're also used in biotechnology while making medicines for diabetes, like insulin. And that's it, not just for prokaryotes, but for all living organisms. As always, it's recap time. So, in this lesson, we started by talking about the plant kingdom. In the plant kingdom, we discussed ferns and flowering plants. And in flowering plants, we talked about dicots and monocots. We then moved on to the fungi and we talked about how different fungi have different appearances and different functions. We then moved on to protists or protoctists, which we noticed were very peculiar looking creatures. We then talked about prokaryotic cells or bacterial cells and how they affect the environment. You answered some questions for me along the way, and with that, we ended this lesson. So, guys, I hope your concepts are clear now, and I'll see you in the next one.